headlines. Top military officers of South Korea and the United States meet for talks that they described as productive regarding North Korea-related security threats, but they say the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system to South Korea was not on the table. The South Korean government announces its founding membership to a China-led infrastructure bank and says it's now pushing to secure a stake that matches the country's economic size. And Korea's main political parties are gearing up for the April by-elections, a good gauge of voter sentiment ahead of next year's general elections. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Happy Friday, everyone. Coming to you live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. The chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, has concluded talks with senior South Korean military officials today in Seoul. He met with his South Korean counterpart, Choi Yoon-hee, and also with the Defense Minister Han Min-koo. Kim Hyun-bin has our top story.
The two sides reaffirmed the 62-year Korea-U.S. alliance, calling it a linchpin of peace and security in Northeast Asia. The Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff said that Dempsey urged the need for integrated air and missile defense. Experts believe Dempsey's comments is Washington's way of suggesting the deployment of THAAD to South Korea and incorporating the Korea air and missile defense system under development into U.S.-led missile defense system. Despite expectations, THAAD was not brought up during Friday's meeting. Now the focus shifts to U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter's visit to Seoul early next month, and whether THAAD will make that agenda. The possible THAAD deployment has stirred controversy in the region as China and Russia are strongly against the move. Their objections stem from the system's ability to shoot down any missiles in the region, as well as its state-of-the-art radar, which can monitor up to 2,000 kilometers, a range that includes large parts of the Chinese mainland. Other items that were discussed today include the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul, as well as ways to bolster Korea-U.S. defense postures. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Korea has finally announced its stance on a new China-led regional development bank, and speculation is running high as to whether the decision can influence its diplomatic position teetering between China and the United States. Watchers say it could speed up talks on Washington's potential deployment of THAAD to the Korean peninsula. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the story.
Previously, Washington had expressed concerns about the timing of Korea joining the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank as a founding member.
So every government can make its own decision about whether the way to achieve that goal is by joining before the Articles of Agreement are clarified, or by waiting to see what the evidence looks like as the bank starts to operate.
The U.S. State Department reiterated its stance on Thursday, saying it's up to each country to join the new financial institution. Washington took issue with the transparency of the AIIB, saying it must meet the standards of other multilateral development banks. An official at Seoul's foreign ministry said Korea consulted with the U.S. leading up to the decision and delivered America's concerns to Beijing. He also said Beijing pushed hard for Seoul to join the AIIB as a founding member, bringing up the issue at every round of high-level talks between the two countries. Pundits say now could be the time to start official talks between Seoul and Washington on the possible deployment of the Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense Battery, also known as THAAD, in South Korea. But for China, the AIIB and THAAD will be two separate issues.
It's true that China welcomes Korea's joining of the AIIB, but that doesn't mean it will close its eyes on the THAAD deployment. Because THAAD is deeply connected to China's national security, it will always be vocal about it.
When Korea begins its negotiations with the U.S. on the deployment of THAAD, experts say it will have to mimic its approach with the AIIB membership, listening closely to Beijing's concerns and delivering them to Washington. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Then in this next report, let's go in depth on what it means for Korea to join the new China-led regional development bank. Pundits say this is likely to open up immense business opportunities for local companies and infrastructure building projects in Asia, while strengthening economic ties with China. Hwang Jie reports.
The South Korean government says it will join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank that aims to provide low-income countries with the necessary funds for large-scale development projects. And the decision is forecast to largely benefit local construction and telecommunications companies.
The bank will spur a huge demand for infrastructure work in Asia that local companies with extensive experience in construction, telecommunication, and transportation can jump into to meet the demand.
While membership of the AIIB is also expected to enhance South Korea's economic ties with China, many agree it will help Seoul by providing massive amount of funds critical to develop North Korea in case of unification.
South Korea could take a lead in developing the Northeast Asian region, including North Korea, by participating in the AIIB.
Given that this announcement only marks the beginning of this process, attention is focused on how South Korea can secure voting rights that will decide its role in the bank. As Seoul's finance ministry assured that it will do its best to maximize national interest, it added that China is unlikely to get 50% of the voting rights. That due to more than 30 countries deciding to join the bank and more expected to do so. Participants have agreed that voting rights will match with the contributions made, with Asian countries having 75% of the rights. Korea stands as the third largest economy by size after China and India among the Asian nations, but the ministry said it couldn't assure its voting rights will also be the third largest, as many other factors may play a part. Once South Korea is confirmed as a founding member and signs up around June this year, the National Assembly is expected to swiftly ratify the move. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
An increasing number of Korean businesses are looking to Latin America for expansion and growth. Companies from both regions are attending this year's Inter-American Development Bank meeting, which kicked off in the southern port city of Busan. Our Shin Se-min has more.
This local steel product manufacturing company says its business has been hurting. Supplying the shipbuilding and heavy machinery industries has become a lot more complicated.
Cheaper Chinese ships fueling the global market have made supplying the naval industry more competitive, but opportunities like this could help my company expand in the Latin American region.
Un is one of the 3,000-plus participants from a total of 48 member nations gathered at the annual Inter-American Development Bank meeting in Busan. Through one-on-one summits, entrepreneurs are making valuable connections and exchanging business practices.
So it's a very vibrant relationship, and also it's quite a high value-added relationship in terms of Korea. The Korean companies are investing and are producing some of the most sophisticated products in the world.
Trade volume with Latin American countries more than doubled last year to $54.2 billion, up from a mere $2.2 when Korea first joined the IDB. Direct investment to the region also rose sixfold to $35 billion.
The Latin American market is one that many Korean companies have yet to tackle. Countries there are rich in resources with an annual 6% growth rate. It's the next target market for many Korean businesses, both large and mid-sized.
Although the deals being signed here aren't huge figures yet, the local trade agency believes that it is a progressive first step for many SMEs expanding out to the global market, especially creating trust-building opportunities between the nations. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News, Busan.
The UN Human Rights Council has adopted a new resolution on North Korea's human rights violations. The new draft, submitted by the European Union and Japan last week, calls for the need to refer the situation in North Korea to the International Criminal Court. The resolution also called for greater attention from the international community on North Korea's abduction of foreigners. Earlier this week, Pyongyang slammed the United Nations moves to adopt the resolution, denouncing it as an intolerable political provocation. It's now official. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will address the U.S. Congress when he visits Washington next month. The focal point for Korea, at least, is whether he will touch on his country's wartime atrocities and how much remorse he will express. Connie Kim tells us more.
When Prime Minister Shinzo Abe addresses a joint meeting of the U.S. Congress on April 29th, attention will focus on whether he touches on Japan's wartime atrocities. It's widely speculated he won't.
Abe is likely to devote much of his speech to the massive Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact and Japan's right to collective self-defense rather than its wartime atrocities.
U.S. House of Representatives Speaker John Boehner said Thursday Abe's address will be an opportunity to hear ways to expand economic and security cooperation from a close ally. Abe's trip is expected to strengthen bilateral ties with Washington. It comes at a time when U.S. officials are hoping to see a breakthrough in trade talks, namely the TPP, with President Obama's pivot to Asia. Relations between Washington and Tokyo are friendlier than ever, with Chairman of the Senate John McCain publicly praising Abe as a strong leader on Thursday. While the content of the Prime Minister's speech is not yet known, it's likely to also affect relations with its neighboring countries. Some experts say how Korea and China interpret and react to Abe's speech will be critical for historical, territorial, and security issues.
In the last ministerial meeting between China, Korea, and Japan, China and South Korea has conditioned the likelihood of a possible summit among the three countries based on Mr. Abe's speech. If Mr. Abe doesn't address these issues as China and South Korea would like it, it's highly doubtful that a summit would materialize.
With Abe's invitation to a joint meeting of Congress being the first for a Japanese leader, experts say no matter what he addresses, it'll garner attention. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Korea's main parties are gearing up for the upcoming by-elections, which is just about a month away from now. Only 4 seats are up for grabs, but both parties are giving their all, as this will be a good chance to gauge voter sentiment ahead of next year's general elections. Our Park Ji-won reports.
The ruling Saenuri Party held a training program for hundreds of regional party members this afternoon in Seongnam. Key members of the party, including leader Kim Moo-sang, attended the program to strengthen the Conservative Party's grip on the region.
This district in Seongnam requires a lot of effort from a representative lawmaker, such as a subway project linking Seongnam to other cities. Do you think that a first-term lawmaker from the opposition can win a bid for such a big project?
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is also trying to make an impact in the area, holding its Supreme Council meeting there earlier Friday. Afterwards, party leader Moon Jae-in visited a community welfare center and the region's textile industry association.
The city of Seongnam recently passed a municipal ordinance allowing its citizens to receive public allowances for postnatal care for the first time in the country. This is what city council members and the mayor from our party have achieved.
4 constituencies are up for grabs in next month's by-elections, one each in Seongnam, Seoul, Incheon, and the southwestern city of Gwangju. 3 of the seats were vacated by the dissolved far-left Unified Progressive Party late last year. The remaining seat was left open by a Saenuri Party lawmaker who lost his status due to a jail sentence. These by-elections will be significant for both parties.
The result will decide whether the ruling party will have a successful third year or whether the opposition party will strengthen its presence. In addition, the election could also decide whether the two party leaders will gain public recognition as future presidential candidates.
The by-elections will be held on April 29th. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Teenagers used social media less than people in their 30s last year. Statistics by the Korea Information Society Development Institute showed that people in their 30s were about 7% more active on social media than teenagers. But people in their 20s were the most active, with a near 75% usage rate. Although the total number of people using social media increased overall, the institute said that total usage time fell as people in their 20s reduced their daily usage by 22 minutes. Most Koreans used Kakao Story, followed by Facebook. Korea produces over 700,000 tons of slag a year. If you're wondering, slag is the waste from processed iron and steel. And until now, the heaps of slag have been buried underground with no way to reuse it. But that won't be the case in the near future. Our Son Jung-in tells us more.
Slag from iron and steel has long been perceived as a nuisance that contributes to air pollution and water contamination. Korea currently buries 720,000 tons of it every year in landfills without any way to recycle it. Now, the Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute, along with the R&D Center for Valuable Recycling, have succeeded in developing a technology for turning the waste product into cement.
We freeze the reduced slag using a rapid cooling system. After it is pulverized, we mix it with additional agents to produce cement.
The cement requires less time to solidify. Unlike regular cement that takes almost 20 days to dry, slag cement needs less than 7 days. That means it could be put to use in civil engineering projects such as emergency road work or tunnel repair. Experts have high hopes for the new technology, as rapid hardening cement is an industry worth $25 million and it is expanding every year. Currently, Korea imports 80% of its rapid hardening cement.
If we can get the pricing right and further develop the market, it will create significant added value for the economy and be exportable.
Industry experts expect the new technology to lead to an annual savings of $4 million in slag disposal costs and a reduction in carbon emissions of 500,000 tons a year, in addition to creating 1,200 new jobs. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Korea's Olympic medalist Park Taehwan held a press conference on this Friday and apologized about his doping scandal. Choking back tears, Park said he never relied on drugs but is sorry for letting fans down. He was stripped of 6 medals, one at the Asian Games last year after failing a doping test taken before the event, along with his record as the most decorated Korean athlete to compete at the Asian Games. He may lose more than that, actually, as the punishment could affect his chances of participating in the 2016 Rio Olympics. The 18-month suspension was handed down by swimming's government body, FINA. The ban ends in March next year, but he's not eligible to represent the national team under the Korean Olympic Committee's current regulation, which bans athletes from competing for 3 years after receiving a penalty. Police in Germany have raided the homes of the co-pilot of the Germanwings plane that crashed into the French Alps on Tuesday. This as the young pilot has been accused of killing all 150 people on board, including himself. And to tell us more, Paul E. is joining us from the news center. Paul, shocking details emerging from this tragic crash. Give us the latest update.
Well, investigators say they're still at a loss on the co-pilot's motivations for allegedly driving the aircraft into the mountainside. However, a German tabloid has reported that he underwent psychiatric treatment for serious depression 6 years ago. Attention was focused on 2 homes on Friday morning linked to the 28-year-old Germanwings co-pilot named Andreas Lubitz. Police and a swarm of journalists patrolled outside a house in Montebar, believed to belong to his parents. Meanwhile, aviation security experts say the incident represented a failing, or rather lapse, in flight regulations.
The failing here is only allowing one person in the cockpit at any one stage. I would either say it's an absolute rule that no matter what is happening, there should always be two people in the cockpit, or alternatively, if you do need to leave, then there should be someone else who is trained to fly or has a rudimentary knowledge that can come in and stand in.
Several airlines have responded immediately by changing their rules to require a second crew member to be in the cockpit at all times. In the meantime, helicopters continue the search and recovery operation over the 16,000 square meter crash site in hopes of finding the second black box data recorder.
And shifting now to Pakistan, an explosion in the southern city of Karachi has killed 20 police officers and injured more than a dozen others. Do authorities know at this point who carried out this deadly attack?
Well, an investigation is still underway. However, the Tehrik-e-Taliban, or TPP, has claimed responsibility for the blast, which went off in the eastern part of the city. Rescue and emergency teams rushed to the scene on Friday after a bomb planted on a motorcycle detonated near a special security transport, which was carrying 50 policemen at the time.
The policemen were coming from Razakabad to resume duty at Bilawal House. When they reached here, a motorcycle was parked here and suddenly the explosion took place. 2 of the policemen died. About 14 were wounded.
Hospital officials say that most of the victims had suffered shrapnel injuries, with one still in critical condition. The incident comes just a day after 4 other policemen were killed in a drive-by shooting in the same city. In the wake of the renewed violence, the government has vowed to crack down on all militant groups.
And let's take a look at the latest rankings by Fortune magazine. Apple CEO Tim Cook has topped this year's list of the world's greatest leaders. I mean, I think it's safe to say that he's doing all right in the shadow of Steve Jobs' legacy. But how did exactly make it to #1 this year?
Well, according to the editors of Fortune magazine, the potential candidates were judged within their respective fields, whether it was in government or in sports. They also said it wasn't just simply about being in a position of power, but rather leaders who exemplified a clear vision to inspire others. The magazine credited Tim Cook for making Apple the world's most profitable company, while praising him for his charitable contributions. The second annual list also featured well-known names like social media savvy pop star Taylor Swift, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and Pope Francis, who dropped from the #1 spot to 4 compared to last year. And rounding out the top 10 was 17-year-old Joshua Wong, who became the face of last year's Hong Kong democracy movement.
And finally, Facebook is again stealing headlines in the tech industry, this time for a range of cutting-edge projects from virtual reality to robotic drones. Give us a rundown of these latest ventures.
Well, like you mentioned, Facebook is doubling down on these high-tech advances, which also include artificial intelligence, as a means to create what they described as a more lifelike and useful social network. On Thursday, Facebook's top executives showed off some of the projects at its annual developers conference in San Francisco. The company touted its virtual reality headset Oculus Rift, as well as the first test flight of a solar-powered drone aimed at delivering internet connectivity to remote parts of the world.
So what we're doing with Connectivity Labs is investing, as we have in OCP and others, in radical new approaches to this problem. And this basically means going to the sky. You have to have satellites, drones, and other things that don't require the massive investments in terrestrial infrastructure in order to affordably provide internet access for this world.
Facebook says it's also working with Google in building a network of satellites and drones to connect the billions of people who lack internet access, as the companies compete to become the go-to online hub for consumers and marketers. Chery?
All right, Paul, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for those stories, and we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. So hope you were able to enjoy the wonderful spring-like conditions. This afternoon, daytime highs jumped about 2 to 15 degrees above seasonal norms, but keep in mind that numbers will drop as the night progresses. And at the moment, it is mostly clear skies nationwide, but rain clouds are moving in down south, including Jeju, and that could lead to light showers later tonight. But unlike today, tomorrow is shaping up to be a cloudy one, and on Sunday, up to 5 millimeters of rainfall could fall here in the central regions, including Seoul. But unfortunately, this won't be enough help for the dry conditions we are experiencing. Humidity levels have dipped to as low as 14% in some places. On to Saturday's readings. Seoul reaches a high of 16, Daegu jumps to 21, Gwangju and Busan hits 17. Moving on to other regions. Jeju hits 16, Dokdo 13, Mount Kumgang hits 7. Those are the updates I have for you now. Hope you have a wonderful Friday evening.
Thank you very much, Bo-kyung, and that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.